Puff it up, puff it in, let me begin.
Pop, pop. Hey guys, welcome back to the Arthritis Podcast, official podcast of digital and creative media works, where each week we take something from pop culture and try to break it down to better understand it. My name is David.
Hi, my name's Ben.
Yeah, I pronounced that clearly this time. I'm going in hot. It's time to...
I mean, you didn't. You fucked up one of the words.
Did I?
You put in like a weird extra sound in there.
I've done that. I've been doing that.
Go back and re-listen to it. You said like...
Ooh.
You said like when you went to say like breakdown, you said like breakdown.
Maybe I'll like overdub it so no one knows I did it wrong.
And I'm just the weird one?
Yeah, and then you sound insane.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Breakdown. There you go. Just cut that over the top. It's good. No, so this week, we're in the middle of world building month. We got like, I think 1 week. Oh, no, this is the last week of world building.
Is it?
Yeah, because we've only done 3 because we were away the first week because you were dying.
Slacked off on the first week. Yeah.
Yep. And so instead, what we're doing this week is we're going to talk about something that isn't necessarily like, it's not super current, but it's something that I keep thinking about. And I decided to replay it because this week we're talking about the world building of Bioshock Infinite.
Oh boy, it's this game.
Yeah. Now, I did a bit of research this morning about the way that people critiqued this game when it came out.
Right.
And pretty much all of the feedback was the same, where they were like, the world building is really cool, like the characters are really interesting, the concepts are really good, just the gunplay isn't great.
And I really like the gunplay.
Interesting. Okay.
But I guess we're not going to get into the gunplay. So we're going to get
We'll
into
touch on it with some of the world building a bit later.
Right.
But there was a sense that like in the other Bioshock games, they're quite slow. Like the pacing of the game is very different to the other Bioshocks. Where in the first one, it's very like kind of plotting and deliberate, and like you move slowly and you do things slowly, and you have to change hands to use your abilities, and it's very much like this kind of claustrophobic, slow-paced, creeping kind of thing.
It's more of a horror game.
Yeah,
Bioshock 1.
and it kind of transitions halfway through into being an action game when you get like strong enough and good enough weapons, and then it becomes an action game. But yeah, like a good portion of the first bit, especially the first half, is kind of a horror. Whereas I feel like with Bioshock 2, they lent into the action because that's pretty much just an action game. But it's still very like...
It has multiplayer, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
It has like online competitive multiplayer.
It's very corridor shootery kind of vibe.
It's like Fear with abilities.
Whereas Bioshock Infinite plays like Rage, which I don't know if you've ever played, but that's basically
Rage, yeah.
id at like when they were trying to work
Peak
out what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
It plays almost exactly the same, from like the types of guns that you get to the way that you fight enemies. But plus you got the addition of the vigors, which are like your abilities, the sort of quote unquote like powers that you have. Yeah. And then also these skyhooks that you use to traverse the world. But what I kind of liked about, I went back into replaying it kind of hesitant, because I was cold on it in hindsight. Like I liked the ideas in the game. I just thought the execution was like a bit shit.
Just a bit.
Because like it's
a little bit.
It's
shit.
a Ken Levine joint, so you know that he's put all his heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
But like, the whole thing was just a bit average for me.
Yeah, I found Bioshock Infinite when I played it through, like, I weirdly enjoyed the gunplay, but that's just because as soon as they gave me the carbine, I was like, oh, absolutely.
Oh, when they gave me a sniper and a hand cannon, I was like, fuck
so
yeah.
Like the carbine for me is like, I just really enjoyed that weapon. So like I played the whole game with that gun.
Yeah, I've been playing the whole thing with the sniper rifle.
Yeah, so like, the whole, like a lot of the problems that come from the gunplay are kind of fine if you just have one gun that you really enjoy and you exclusively use it.
Kind of okay.
Because everything else just kind of goes away. All of the bad gunplay just disappears when you use one good gun.
Yes.
And like the combat is repetitive and meaningless and doesn't add anything to the story and doesn't make sense in terms of the story, and it's cognitive dissonance. Like gone wrong. But
they try their best to. So there are some concepts in this game that I find extremely interesting as far as like world building and characters, especially Booker DeWitt. So Booker's the character that you play, and in the other Bioshock games, in the first one you play as like the nameless Jack.
You just play as a dude.
Who you find out later is like you're like a plant who's been like programmed to come back and like destroy.
But like for all intents and purposes, you're just a dude.
You're just a guy.
Yeah. You're just a guy.
And then in the second one, like you're a big daddy who's like, or you're a person who gets made into a big daddy, so you don't really have a personality. You just do stuff.
You're just a guy.
Yeah, you're just another guy. Whereas with this one, you're this character with, and we'll talk about this in a minute when we get to like Elizabeth and the kind of relationship that they develop there. But you're a character who has a backstory that exists in this world already, and you've been around forever. So characters, like, when they meet you, they know you, and they know what you've done, and they know who you were. And one of the... There's two ways the game tries to execute on telling you this backstory. One of them is conversations with Elizabeth, which often work incredibly well. So you'll, like, be walking through just, like, an area, and if you kind of... Because what I do when I play this game, or when I've been replaying it, is enjoying the slower sections, so like stopping to look at all like the scenery and try and work out what happened. And when you do that, she'll kind of have like these bits of dialogue where she'll start talking to you, and you have like interactions that are so well written. Like she'll be like, oh, you know, as you get through the game, she gets less and less curious and more like judgy of what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's a really slow, subtle change. But there was a point this morning when I was playing where it's just after you go through the rift, and it's like you're in the fucking war-torn Colombia, and she like stops to... You're in this room, and they have these red, the Vox Populi, who are like the revolutionaries, use like red banners that they drape over everything, and it looks like blood, but it's ribbon. It's such a cool... And then some of it like becomes blood where someone's been killed. It's a really cool visual aesthetic. But there's a room which you go into, and it's just these two people horribly murdered in the room, and like the red ribbons like strewn around it, like kind of mingles with their blood and goes up the walls and stuff. And you can't really tell where the ribbon starts and the blood ends. And I kind of was staring at it being like, what the fuck? And Elizabeth goes, oh my God, what happened here? And Booker just goes, that's not the worst I've seen. And I went, okay. And it's small stuff like that where you get hints at like the kind of stuff that he's done. That works really well when you're talking to Elizabeth. The bit where the game falls down is when it tries to do Bioshock stuff. So like in the first game, Bioshock stuff is a level and there's a boss at the end and they taunt you the whole time. And they have a power, and when you kill them, you get that power. That's like how bosses worked in Bioshock, the first game. So like there was one who was like the photographer dude who was like he wore like the rabbit masks and shit, and he had like the ice powers or something or other. Like there was kind of set things that you would interact with in that story. That
I didn't play enough Bioshock 1.
No one fucking
got too
remembers
scared.
it. Everyone thinks it's really good.
I got scared in the first 10 minutes, stopped playing.
Oh my God, it's pretty spoopy.
It is super spooky.
I played the remastered one, and that's even spoopier. Yeah. And after they patched it, because it's full of some graphical errors.
Yeah.
But like, do you have a strong opinion on this idea of like, because a lot of people don't think that games should have bosses, especially shooters. How do you feel about that stuff in broad strokes? And then we'll nail down into like how this game does it.
Broad strokes, like bosses make sense. Like it's, you know, it's a figurehead. It's like it's a goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an achievable thing that you achieve, and then you do it, and you've achieved it, and you get an achievement.
Mm-hmm.
But they're really hard to do, for one.
And hard to do well, especially.
They're hard to do well. Like you can do a boss, you just chuck in a dude with a lot of HP. It's like, yeah, whatever. But like doing a good boss is usually quite difficult. And it's a weird, difficult kind of balance where like a good boss is usually the kind of thing where a good player should be able to beat a good boss without any failures.
Yes.
Because a bad boss is one that's like where it sort of you can't avoid failure in a sense.
Yes. So this would be like excluding From Software games, because that's a whole other kind of creature.
You can beat From Software bosses without taking any damage. It is possible.
Yeah,
it's just very difficult.
It's just hard. No, you're right. Yeah. You mean like bosses where they have you have to learn like a specific sequence, like
usually like
Ninja Gaiden
bosses are just puzzles.
Yeah.
And they have patterns.
Which is kind of annoying. Like that, I totally agree. Like I think when a boss forces you to learn their pattern, you're not really having fun and like intuiting the game world. If it's too gamey, do you know what I mean?
There's bosses that just have patterns. So that's like Mario bosses. So like in all the bosses in Mario Odyssey, they all have the pattern.
But they're pretty simple.
Yeah. So like they're pretty easy. But stuff like Dark Souls, where they don't have a pattern per se. They just have certain moves, and you have to know how to dodge each move.
They use the world's rules in different ways than other creatures, which I think
there's usually, and then sort of the more abstract you get, the more sort of like different kind, you sort of on that spectrum of like pure just like rote puzzle memorization,
and then just bonkers shit.
Yeah, versus sort of like intuiting.
Where they like fight a giant dragon, and it's like in stages, or like there's different things they do with that. And that's kind of something that I've always been interested in with video games, especially because I am so invested in the Souls series. But one thing that Infinite does really weirdly. So in the first Bioshock,
I remember the bosses in Infinite.
Yeah, I'll touch on that in a second. So in the first Bioshock,
because I know Bioshock 1 has very discrete.
They're like at the end
bosses.
of every level.
Yeah,
and you fight like the dude who's been taunting you the whole time.
Yeah, like in the room you're in.
Infinite's really different. So Infinite has these characters, and I think it's because of the world that it puts it in. So Columbia is this place where like everyone is kind of a bad guy, but no one's really a villain. So like they're in this like floating city, and it's really cool, and like Comstock is in charge, and he's kind of maybe a lunatic, but the more of the game you play, you see that like the Revolutionary Force, led by Daisy Fitzroy, is no better than like Comstock's forces.
Yeah, they're
like
kind of the worst.
They're the worst, but so like at least Comstock, no one was getting murdered in the streets, and so there's like this kind of interesting commentary the game has on that. But one of the outcomes of building that world that they put together is everyone lives in these floating cities created by the Lutesses, who discover these quantum particles, which are also the same thing that Elizabeth uses to open the tears and let you get to other realities. But a consequence of building a world like that is when you put characters in it who you want to make villains, it never quite works because everyone has a reason to do what they're doing. So like everyone has really strong pathos. Like for instance, there's a captain that it's like an army captain who Booker fought with in a previous, like in World War One, because it's set in like 1914, I think. It might be, no, they might have fought in the Balkans together. I can't remember. But they fought together previously in a war on the ground. Right. And so he's a character who knows who Booker is. And he's kind of lost his mind because, Comstock has ripped him of all of his, like, his achievements, and he's lying and saying that Comstock did it all. And he's like, this fucking guy, man, like, he's taken everything that we did, and he's making it all about him. He was never there. Fuck that guy. You gotta let my men die a soldier's death. And then he sends all of his men to try and kill you. And you're like, I don't want to do this. And he's like, doesn't matter, they're gonna kill you if you don't. So you end up murdering all of his men. And then at the end, he just, like, gives up. And he's like, okay, well... And he asks you to kill him. And if you don't, he gets captured by Comstock's forces, and then later on in the game, you find him as, like, a vegetable in a prison cell. But the game doesn't tell you that's what's going to happen. It just goes, you can spare him or not.
Yeah.
And that kind of storytelling is what the game does really well. But it doesn't really work a lot of the time because everyone's not a villain.
Yeah,
it's strange. Like, there's no real bosses because of that. Like, it's always you always get to the end boss and it's like, okay, I can't do anything here. Like, when Daisy Fitzroy gets killed, you literally, like, watch her murder Finkton or whoever. I think it's Finkton or something like that. And then you boost Elizabeth up and she kills Fitzroy. Because Elizabeth's really the protagonist of the story. You're kind of just the meat grinder machine.
Yeah.
Which I started to hate when I was playing it, and then I went, oh, actually, that's really clever. Because normally in Bioshock, you get kind of bored of, like the person you're playing is just Murder Boy, right? Whereas I feel like with this, you have the surrogate of Elizabeth. It's the same reason, like, The Last of Us works. Right, is you have someone that you care about, and you're watching her slowly get her, like, innocence ripped away as you murder hordes of enemies. And it's like, yay, now I'm sad again. But yeah, there's no real bosses because of that, because really the person who's learning and achieving something from them is Elizabeth, not you.
Right, yeah.
You're just the guy who turns up with the gun and takes out all the minions.
Yeah, well, this game, the Infinite doesn't have, like, those discrete bosses. It has, like, set pieces still. I'm like...
There's several set pieces,
like, vaguely
and
remembering
then
this game.
There's, like, bits where you go into, like, airships and you kill... There's, like, quote-unquote mini-bosses that are, like, substitutes for the big daddies. So there's the handyman, who are, like, the big kind of hulking machinations with the big chests and the...
Yeah.
And they made... Some of the stuff is pretty fucked up, though. So those are, like, made by Finkton, and he gets people who have cancer and then puts them in these things to save their lives, and they become, like, his slaves, but they still have their sentience. So while they're fighting you, they're like, no, stop, I don't want to do this.
Oh, yeah,
just kill me. And you're like, oh, God. Like, there's a lot of that
just
in this
kill
game.
Me.
Yeah, they're like, kill me, I don't want to do this. And they're, like, always coughing and wheezing. It's pretty horrific. Like, it's... Compared to the other Bioshocks, which are, like, this kind of undersea utopia that falls apart, this one's just dark from, like, the jump. Even, like, the first time you walk into Columbia, you're like, oh my God, it's really nice. Where are all the black people? And it kind of just keeps building
all the
on
Irish
those themes.
people. Which is,
yeah.
I think this game does get a lot of criticisms because of that aspect, I guess. The sort of message that it tries to sort of create. And it does tie in a bit to the Vox Populi because they're basically the IRA.
They're the standards, yeah.
Yeah. And
to the point where they even, like, they use the red and, like, she kills someone and then paints her face with their blood. Like, it's pretty fucking dark.
Yeah. But yeah, like I know that a lot that the Vox Populi, their presentation gets a lot of flack for just sort of being. So there is, they have the idea of just like, oh, the rebels are just as bad, and it's they're doing it in such a way where, you have Comstock's forces who are just the bad guys, and like, they're bad because they shoot you, and that's why they're
Pretty
bad.
much, yeah.
Whereas the rebels, it's like they had to, because people have this understanding. It's like, well, they're not shooting me, so they're good. They don't shoot me when I see them.
Yeah.
So therefore, they're good people.
And you also what you go on a mission for Daisy.
Yeah. And so because they had to go like, well, we have to make them like we want to still present these people as being bad. It's like, how do we do that? It's like she'll kill someone and then cover herself with their blood.
Well, no,
you're like, whoa, like hang on.
Well, they triple down on that because she does that, and then the next minute, she knows that you're coming for her because she thinks that you're a ghost because you're from a different reality.
Yeah.
So she grabs a kid and then puts a gun to his head, and she's like, "Don't come any closer, or I'll fucking kill him."
Yeah.
And it's like, what the actual fucking ever-loving shit is happening?
But then the game still kind of goes like, oh, they're the rebels. They're just misunderstood.
The implication
it's
is...
like, oh, like, really? Are you sure?
I think the way that... What's curious to me is the way people read this versus, like, other stuff that's similar, where kind of the message of all of this stuff is, like, everyone's kind of bad and everyone's kind of good. Like, even when you get to the end of the game and you discover that, like, Comstock is Booker from a different reality and all that stuff. Like... And then Elizabeth's his daughter, but like it's kind of fucked up and weird. Kind of one of the interesting things about that trajectory of going from everyone is, Comstock is like this racist dude and these Vox Populi are like good, to the point where you're murdering the Vox Populi and she's covered in blood and about to kill a kid. Like, the reason that happens is that Elizabeth starts fucking with the Tez. And what you find out later on is that Comstock had locked her in the tower because the Lutesses were like, this fucking girl will rip reality apart with these tears if we don't keep it under control.
Yeah.
The whole tower is built to contain her ability to like create new tears and walk into them, right? So what you end up with is this weird thing where the reason, like, because initially you think Comstock is evil because he locks a girl in a fucking tower and you're sent to go get her.
And he's the...
Yeah, he's the prophet, fake prophet guy.
Yeah.
And then but then he gets a valid pathos as well, where you're like, oh, well, he lost his daughter in childbirth because another of him took it from him. And it's this really complicated web of like, every Booker ever took someone else's Elizabeth at birth because they lost theirs in childbirth.
Yeah, it's
so
like
the cycle goes on forever.
Yeah.
And that, I was like, oh, of course, we'll talk about the ending in a minute, because there's some buckwild shit. And there are some really good explainer videos that go through it all, which I highly recommend. If you just YouTube Bioshock Infinite ending explained, there are some really good detailed ones. But one thing that's interesting about that is like a world concept is you play a character who is constantly saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to kill these people. And everyone else is saying, this fucking prophet guy is lying, he's never seen war, he's never seen combat. And you're literally him with a gun, walking through, murdering this guy's men. Like, there's this dramatic irony that the game presents with its world building that is so hard to pull off. Like, it's the equivalent of, like, a good time travel story. Like, when you see it, you go, oh, they actually nailed that somehow. Like, it kind of has that...
Like the time traveler's wife.
Like the time traveler's wife, which is actually good, instead of the time machine, which is very sexist and racist and weird.
Time traveler's wife was like one of the few books I've read.
If you don't cry in that book, you're a fucking monster.
Oh yeah, I cried.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie with Eric Bana?
No, I refuse.
It's not great. He's good in it, but...
I know it's not good. Yeah, I refuse to see it.
But like, it's really hard to do those things justice. And Infinite is a good example of like... Because a lot of the time, when you write a narrative and you try to build a world, you'll try and have like the dictator be the foil of the hero. So like Voldemort is Harry's foil because Voldemort is like all the things that Harry isn't, but they have enough in common that like and Harry's like, well, what if I'm just him? Because he has that worry a lot, and it's because they have that relationship as hero and villain.
They're very similar.
And that's a kind of interesting thing to play with, and JK plays around with that nicely. And I think this is a really like, it's like Ken Levine went, I bet I could just do that without any of the legwork of trying to invent these characters meeting at the same point. What if they just went through the same journey and they're at different points?
What if they're just the same person?
Yeah. And then he went,
it's a lot easier to make
a
hero and the villain very similar if they're the same
guy.
person.
And then at the end when it's like Booker has to accept that he has to die for... There's a lot of stuff going on in that ending that you should just watch and explain it for. But as a world concept, that's so fucking cool to be like, yeah, well, we built this whole game. I wonder what came first. The idea of like Columbia, which might have been the case, or this insane like time travel dimension narrative. Because what they're allowed to do is skip through.
I feel like Columbia probably came first.
I
it's
hope
a bit
so.
less buckwild.
Yeah, it's just fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Like, it really is. And I don't know how to process, like, what they've done with it from, like, how to separate the game aspects from, like, the narrative aspects, because they interweave them so much with Elizabeth that I wonder if this, every time I play it, I'm like, this would be a really good movie to just watch someone else do.
Right, yeah.
Because the gameplay, like, I don't love the shooting. I know, like, a lot of people do, and you're a fan. But it's not for me. Like, it's good, but it's not for me, right?
Yeah.
But it plays like such a movie, the way the story is put together and, like, the intricacies and the delicacies of the world. Like, that was what I was trying to say, the intricacies and the delicate nature they put the world to. Like, the attention to detail. It tastes like a chicken. No, but, like, the attention to detail on everything. Like, there is stuff in this game that they didn't need to do. Like, you can just go into rooms that, like, don't have any loot in them and just see how people used to live. And, like, they didn't need to do that, but they put so much work into it.
And, like, the barbershop quartet that fly around on
There's
the
a
ship.
few really cool
and, like,
moments
cover, like, modern pop songs because...
Yeah, all the gramophones.
Why not?
The gramophones are playing covers of current pop songs.
Yeah.
There's one that plays Tainted Love in a bar.
Yeah,
which is great. That, like, I remember that. And then you go downstairs and you can pick up the guitar. And I think people don't remember this game fondly because they remember the gunplay, because that's a lot of the game.
It's most of the game. It's a shooter.
It's most of the... Yeah. The problem is the bits that matter and that are interesting as a player, rather than as a game, the shooting is the mechanic. But the thing that you play for is the story and the characters. And I think there's this kind of disconnect between the two at certain times, because whereas in the original Bioshock, you remember how well those things meshed. Like, you remember, like, walking into a room and being, like, fucking scared shitless, and then panicking and seeing a guy was standing in, like, a flooded chamber and zapping it and frying him, and then turning around and a guy runs at you with a baseball bat and he clubs you and you kill him, and then you pick up a fucking, a audio tape off his dead body and you listen to it, and then someone else rushes at you and you can't hear half the tape and you only get killed, and you come out of the next room and someone taunts you over a loudspeaker. Like, you remember the integrations of that stuff. I think Infinite suffers from the fact that it's full of really impressive and, like, some of the best written little moments I've ever seen in games. Like, the interactions with Elizabeth, the whole game is written so well that you kind of forget that all of those little things happened, because they're so well done. They almost become, like, so part of the world and so superfluous to the shooting and, like, your mission that you forget that it's happening. Like, I think something that Last of Us did well is if you wanted to do that, you had to hit triangle. So, like, it was less natural, but it meant that you were paying attention. And Infinite kind of suffers from the fact that Elizabeth will just start talking to you, and if you're not paying attention and you kind of zoned out, you maybe won't register that you've had a conversation with her.
Right, yeah.
So it's weird. Like, I don't know how to explain that or articulate that in a way that makes sense, but there is something in that idea of... It's not one big moment in a game. It's not like Dark Souls where you remember killing that one boss that you couldn't do for 35 times or whatever it is, or like when you finally kill the final boss in, the first Dark Souls, or in Halo when you first, like, work out, oh my god, this is the fucking cartographer's room, and you realize it's a Halo ring. Like, stuff like that you don't forget because it's a big moment. This game isn't full of big moments. It's full of small moments done incredibly well. And that's, like, I think Ken Levine's stamp of, like, quality. And I don't know how, like, I don't know how he moves from this into something else. Like, I don't know what he does next from this.
Well, is he doing anything? What's he doing?
He disbanded his studio, but the big thinking of that is he wants to do something really fucking weird next.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Maybe it won't have guns in it.
Maybe it won't have guns in it, because that would be the dream.
You get away from guns, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think what he realized is what he liked was the story. Like, he liked the Elizabeth bit. And, like, her as a character, like, that's such a genius addition to a Bioshock game.
Yeah.
Like, having a surrogate that has a personality and fears and worries and is actually helpful. Like, that's the other thing, is the friction between the game mechanics and the shooting and Elizabeth work really well. Where she'll, like, toss you stuff.
She'll, like, chuck you ammo and
stuff. I wonder, like, how that works mechanically. Do you think it's just random, or is it, like, when your ammo's low, there's a higher chance you'll get ammo?
It does it so it kind of keeps you stocked up and stuff. Yeah, it's sort of... Right. Yeah, it does run on sort of a trying to keep you afloat kind of system.
Yeah, because I think one of the problems with the original Bioshock is you would run out of ammo for your favorite gun a lot.
Yeah.
Like, and like there wasn't a reason that one gun was better than the other, but you might just like using one more, like the pistol or the shotgun or whatever.
The carbine.
And you keep running out. Whereas I feel like Infinite, they wanted you to feel like you were always low on ammo, but there was always something available to you. Like she would always have something for you when you needed it.
And it was pretty, quick and seamless. And, in terms of like the combat, probably the best way they could have handled the fact that Elizabeth is following you around is just like she just hides and chucks you ammo.
Yeah,
it's like, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And
it's not like you have to like defend her or anything, or like
no.
She has like her own health
annoying.
bar, which she'd get hit by enemies and stuff. It's like, nah, she takes care of herself, and
she's fine.
Kind of just gives you more ammo.
And she creates the tears that give you more options if you want. So you can put in like cover or like a machine gun turret or something, which is like a fun, like it just adds
like
a
bit whatever. Yeah, like that whole thing is just like whatever.
Yeah.
Like
you kind of go,
like, okay,
but it fits in with
fine.
the world building of what they're doing. So I kind of shrug and I go, I guess like
the chucking out. Like I find her chucking ammo is more interesting.
It's
than
so
that,
seamless
in a weird way.
It's really seamless too, because what they do is like they'll tell when she calls out to you and you hit
have to,
F.
like, look to her.
Your view snaps to her, and she'll teleport into a spot that means that she could actually throw it to you.
She'll teleport, so she'll always do it when she's not...
Unless she's when she's not in your
view.
Unless she's close enough and there's nothing in her way. So I don't know, it must have taken so much work to get that right.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where she will... Yeah, if she's off screen, they'll do a lot of hackery to kind of put her behind cover.
Yes.
But
so that she can chuck it to you. But if she's in sight, she'll just toss it to you.
She'll just chuck it,
But it's that snap is really interesting because...
On paper, it's such a bad idea.
But it's weird. In practice, it works so well.
Yeah.
Or like you'll just be like cranking around like the Columbia, and she'll be like, "I found some money." She'll just ping you a quarter.
Yeah.
Cats. And that animation and the sound design. Oh my god, the sound design in this game is incredible. When she pings you that quarter and you catch it, every single time, it's so satisfying. Yes. I don't know how they did it. Like I know it's because it's like that Bioshock style where it's like slightly cel shaded.
It made the noise.
And it makes the noise, and everything feels right, and all the guns sound right. The sniper rifle sounds like a wet dream, and the hand cannon, which is the giant revolver, goes off like it's a fucking thunder stick in your fucking hand. And like everything sounds great, and the vigors are whatever. I don't think they need it. They don't add anything.
The vigors, there's a lot of weird things in this game that are kind of... They're there because the game has Bioshock in the title.
Yeah.
I feel like the shooting is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The vigors is another big one.
Because they could have made this a puzzle game where you just have vigors. Or, like, there's ways they could have done this game where...
Well, they could have just made it, a puzzle game.
Like a stealth kind of... Because there's so many elements, I don't know.
But part of it is it needed to sell. Bioshock Infinite has probably one of the worst game covers, like box art covers of all
as far
time.
As like translation to representation.
Yeah, because it's
fucking
just
terrible.
Booker holding
it's
a
up there
gun.
with Uncharted and a few others.
It's the dude like holding gun,
and he's
cover.
got nothing to do with the point of playing. The
game.
It's so weird.
It's a very just like, all right, that's okay, and like that kind of cover works well. Like even Doom 2016, that cover sucked to the point
compared
where
to that game.
To the point where they had like a remake of the original Doom cover in like the reverse sleeve, because that cover is just so much better.
But I don't like. There's so many options for what you could have put on this cover that would have been incredible.
Yeah, and it does come down to like that. There was definitely a vision with like Elizabeth's story and like Columbia and like exploring this world and doing all this cool world building stuff, and then like. Who published this game? Ubi? No.
No, this is it's a 4K game. So who published it? It was.
You mean 2K?
2K, yeah, it's a 2K game.
2K, yeah. So and then they're obviously just like, well, it's a Bioshock game because that's the only way, Kevin Levine could make a video game as if it was Bioshock, and then. Because of that, it has to have guns. He was like, I want to have guns. Yeah,
it felt like that was like an afterthought where they went, fuck.
It's like, shit, we actually need to put guns in this game.
And then they went, it's Bioshock, it needs plasma, so we're going to put vigors in. Like, it very much had that thing of like, okay. Like, some of that stuff feels a bit paint by numbers compared to like how intricate the story is.
Compared to also how it worked in Bioshock, like the first one, where the plasmids made a lot of sense in the story, with the big daddies and the little sisters.
Yeah, all of that stuff was like a resource.
Like it actually created like, and it made sense. It wasn't just like, you can turn your hand into bees, hand bees.
They were just kind of they were
it was
weird.
like that in Bioshock Infinite. It's just like hand bees. Get your hand bees, and it's like, I guess
some of them
Bioshock.
like even in the first Bioshock game, they were using the plasmids for work. Like they were doing things with them that were like clearly work related. Like they were like, oh, we use this plasmid for like when we're like working in the field doing this thing, like farming or whatever. And the bee thing is for farming and stuff like. Whereas I feel like in Infinite, everyone uses them as weapons, and which is fine because it's Columbia, but it just has this vibe of like it feels like an afterthought.
At least in like, well, in
some
both
of the time,
in all of them, they run the joke of like the flame one being like it's just like having a lighter in your hand.
There's a fucking great moment
but I think in Infinite they actually reword it as like it's like having a flamethrower up your sleeve, and it's in the first Bioshock it's specifically a lighter because it's like lighting cigarettes and shit like that because it's like a 20s.
They do that in the DLC for Bioshock Infinite.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Cool.
Yeah, because that's a whole different. No, that's a whole different story.
We have to do like a whole episode on that because that's
completely different. Yeah.
But that's a cool idea. It's very like noir meets steampunk.
But then like in Infinite, it's like
throw fire grenades.
Yeah, you get a lot of the Vigors at that carnival where they're like advertising them.
Yeah, you get, like,
and they're all weapons. They're all just like hit the targets and get a Vigor that lets you hit targets.
There's not one like
take control of this guy and he'll fight for you. Like it's specifically like combat focused.
It never feels like they existed in the world beforehand.
Yeah. No, it feels like they're combat upgrades.
Which doesn't
that some guy has come in and put into the world.
I mean, the weapon mechanic is burdened by that as well, where like the weapon upgrades suck shit. Where it's like you go into like a vending machine and you give your gun plus 25% damage. The Bioshock 1 upgrades were fucking sick ass. You were like, strap this like jerry-rigged thing to my shotgun and it gives me an extra shot of ammo, but it makes it look fucking weird and ugly. Yeah. Strap another one on, get an extra melee damage. Fuck yeah. Like it was weird shit that you did to it. And it had an in-world explanation. It wasn't just plus 25 plus to the damage. Stat. It was like, no, add another bit to the bottom of the cartridge with like duct tape. Like that stuff was so cool.
Does this game suck?
It would if the story wasn't so fucking good. Like I honestly think it would if it wasn't so well written. This is like a writer's wet dream. Like there is stuff in this that I see and I go, holy fucking shit. How did they execute on this? Because I could like this is a thing that they would have had to have a few ideas from and then grown it naturally and then spent so long in the scripting process making this work. Yeah. And I'm blown away by how intricately detailed the writing is and as an extension the world is. And it's just a shame that for whatever reason the kind of the window dressing of the game mechanics and stuff like that feels like an afterthought because of that reason. And I don't think that's that's not always a bad thing and it's no one's fault, but it is weird when there's not that level of integration that other games that you play have. Like Firewatch has like perfect integration of like game mechanics and narrative, and like same with like something like a Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne do that really well, where they understand where they should put their story in. Bioshock Infinite feels like they had a really good idea for a story, and then they went, and
then they ran off and took like a weird Dishonored kind of game.
They were like, how do we make this into Bioshock?
Story onto it, yeah.
Yeah, and to some extent, like Dishonored 2 has the same problem. And it's just interesting that it's always first-person shooters that tend to have that issue, because I think, or first-person like action games, I guess, because this is explicitly a shooter, but it has that vibe where it could be Dishonored, especially even art style. They're very similar.
Yeah,
it's just curious that. Like, I would love to see what Ken Levine does next, but I think that if you were kind of miffed on Infinite the first time, I kind of recommend playing it just on easy and, like, forgetting the combat, just to experience the story, like, get totally immersed in it, because it is so clever and interesting. Like, the subtle shit they've put in blows my mind. And I was expecting to go in and hate it again and be like, this is so average, I'm so bored. But there's stuff where you go into a room that, like, when you go through a tear and you come back to a different room and it's like 3 things have changed, but it tells a totally different story.
Yeah.
And the attention to detail with stuff like that is just sensational. And they put in stuff you don't need, like the barge and where, you go into a basement and you play a song with Elizabeth and, the gramophones and all this stuff, like, you don't need to put in. But they go to the effort to make it feel like it's a world that's always existed, even though sometimes the gameplay in it doesn't feel like it belongs. That sucks. But it's that time of the week. Got any recommendations?
I do.
Now that I've ranted for half an hour.
I do have recommendations. Thank you for ranting for half an hour.
You're welcome.
So I've just sort of caught up to date with this YouTube channel called Winter Garden. So there's this guy, he's like Swedish, and like a few years ago he made a marble machine that would play music. So like a big like marble track, and it would like drop marbles onto like different instruments and play music. And so like he made it for like a uni project or something, and like it was like super jank, and like it literally played one song before just falling apart because it was just plywood and like all hand done. And he put the video up of it and got like 15 bajillion views or some shit. So he was like, well, I want to do it again. I want to take it on tour, but I have to remake it because the original just doesn't work anymore. So he's got this series of videos where he's been remaking. It's called the Marble Machine X, and like, so he's a musician, and it's just him getting into the world of like engineering and like
incredible.
Project management and like building things properly instead of just. Because like in this first one, he would just like be like, yeah, this looks right, and just make it up as he went. And now he's like learning, like doing CAD drawings and like getting like, he has like a CNC machine. He has like a team. He does a project manager. Cool. So there's 40 something episodes up now. They're like 10 minutes each. And like,
dude, that's awesome.
It's a good binge because and like it's still going on. Like he hasn't finished yet, but he wants to do like a world tour once it's done.
That's awesome.
And it's like Laura's been watching them, and she was like, you got to watch them. I was like, all right, because I had a vague interest in them, and they're very interesting. Because it's this guy who knows nothing about
just learning as he goes.
Engineering, just kind of, and like the first one was he built it as he went. He just sort of went like, yeah, this will work, and like it worked once. But now it's like a weird where it'll be like, okay, we're gonna actually make prototypes, and we actually have to like test things, and we have to actually
be a
like
company.
and like sort of learn and plan and.
That sounds like it would tickle the engineering, like software development brain thing.
It's funny because he'll explain a lot of like pure mathematical like concepts like revolutions per minute and like you know like timings and things like that in like musical ways.
Oh, that's cool.
Where instead of being like 30 RPM, he'll be like it runs at like 120 BPM because it runs at 30 revolutions per minute, and we do it in quarters, so that's 120 BPM. That's really cool. And it's like, I guess it's 120 BPM. It's not. It's 30 RPM, but like I guess you can't explain it as 120 BPM. Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
So yeah, and plus he's just kind of funny. So that's what I've been doing.
No, that's good.
Winter Garden. Yeah,
I've been watching. Nick Robinson does a live stream once a week.
Oh god,
where he plays a game, and he played Halo 5 this week, and it changed my mind about that game. So I am well into his streams again.
His videos pop up every now and then I watch them. They're just so fucking dumb.
It's just so insane. If you haven't checked out his channel, you have to.
Did he recently put up a video about like the angriest message on Xbox Live?
Yeah, he just fucking got some guy.
He just trolled some kid on it.
It was like 7 years ago though.
Yeah,
he just had that footage on his hard drive.
I was gonna say, he was playing like Halo 3, and I was like, this is an old video.
It was because when his apartment burned down, like he got all his old hard drives and like plugged them into a new computer, and he was like, what's on here?
He just found like a video of him trolling some 7-year-old.
It's great.
12-year-old, yeah.
I highly recommend his live. He played Hitman, the sniper weird game thing the other week, and it was so fucking funny.
Is that's the mobile game, isn't it?
No. It's like it's the Hitman Season 2 thing.
Okay, because there's like a mobile game called Hitman Sniper, which is legitimately really addicting.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've been watching because I've been working pretty hard. But yeah, that's it. So it's that time of the week. Where can people find us?
Facebook.
DCMWorks Social.
To YouTube.
YouTube.com/DCMWorks.
Twitter.
@DCM_works.
Patreon.
Patreon.com/DCMworks. I posted an update for August about a week ago to Patreon.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. It's like the end of August.
I said about a week ago.
That was like the middle of August?
Well, I'm trying to do them like mid.
Welcome to the mid-August update.
Trying to do them like mid each month.
Okay, so it's on purpose, right? Okay.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't want to do it at the start of the month because I don't know what the plans are going to look like. So I was trying to do them like mid-month. So if you're a Patreon, you can check that out now. Our lowest tier is $3 a month. just helps us do all the stuff we do, and you get access to over 50 episodes of backlog content, stuff like weird audiobooks, a sneak peek at my book, all kinds of good stuff.
Lots of books.
And yeah, it's only $3 a month, helps us out, and you get all kinds of content, so it's a good way to help support the show. And we got a little community there that we're starting to put together. Patrick Laverne, Yub Kumans, those guys are out there giving us some awesome feedback, and it's really fun. You can listen to our Road to Infinity War, which Patrick just finished re-listening to the whole thing, where each week myself, Ben, and Laura watched every single Marvel film in a row.
Marvel Cinematic
in the lead up to Infinity War, and it's
and it was rough.
Yeah, and
it's the idea started as a joke, and then we just did it, and then kind of regret it.
So look forward to that. And he's also suggested that we do a similar thing with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film. So we might do that
absolutely.
Soon. Watch all three in a row and then see how we fare.
I love those films.
So we might look at those soon. Otherwise, you can get at us at all the social places. The best way you can help the show is just tell one person you think might like it. That's the easiest way to help.
Literally double our audience.
Yeah, like that's how that works. If everyone did that, we'd literally double our audience. Or like anyone your
I was just saying, there's only one person who listens to our show.
Well, that would work no matter how many people there are, if you think about it.
No, but I was just saying, just one extra.
Oh, the
person
one guy.
doubles,
Yeah. If you're listening to this, fucking do it. What are you doing? What are you doing right now? What are you doing right now? Probably watching this. Link it to someone before you finish. Yeah, check us out on the socials. But if you want to follow us individually, I'm at DCM I Hate Pie.
I'm at Literal Citrus.
And we will see you guys next week.
Hooray! We did it, David. Congratulations.
Our own show?
Yep.
Is that nepotism?
No, it's not nepotism, David.
Sure?
Are we doing anything else?